of your tests have been completed to get your death date. Are you ready for your results?
Oh my God, I'm gonna die.
It's okay. What does it say?
21,490.
Nicole, that's almost 60 years from now.
What does yours say, babe?
345.
Days?
That is not ideal.
Daniel, sir, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. Nice
I'm
to see
good.
you.
Nice to meet you too. How you doing, Howard?
I'm doing really good. I just rewatched the film this morning, so I'm ready to
Oh,
talk all
awesome.
about it. I loved it. Well, it's a really dark topic, but it's like a really fresh and kind of, yeah, I guess a bright take on death in a way. No, I mean, as humans,
Thanks.
we're hardwired to kind of be curious about death now, but at the same time, it's kind of a taboo subject to talk about, especially our own death or our loved one's death. So I'm really curious about what made you decide to write this kind of, if you, I think you can call it a comedy, no, a comedy about death, about this specific subject.
Yeah, it's strange. People have asked me like where I got the idea and stuff like that, and I actually don't really. There was no pivotal moment, but I did a short years ago. That was about it was a drama, and it was about a gentleman who picked up dead bodies, and that was kind of his job, and he kind of goes through this metamorphosis through that. And then when I decided, to do the feature or a feature, I wanted to kind of do something dark, but funny at the same time. And I think a lot of it also was me dealing with my internal views of death, I guess. I was kind of, it was heavy on my mind since I was like a 5-year-old kid, like what happens when we die and what happens this and that and whatever. And I suppose everybody else goes through that at some point. And so it was really just how could I come up with a dark comedy in a way of juxtaposing death with life and love, and this is what happened. And I think also too, it in a weird way, I've just realized recently, I think it also helped me sort of overcome any leftovers of fear that I might have about death in a weird way. So I guess that was just sort of a bonus.
Yeah, that was yeah, definitely a bonus. If you can kind of take the sting out of death, that's definitely a bonus. I mean, that was what my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you if it was cathartic, because I mean, everyone fears this, the kind of the thought of their own death, but specifically, and also of loved ones. So, did you? I mean, throughout the film, without giving too much away, more he doesn't really want to get this test done to see how long he's got left to live. No, but he comes to terms with it pretty quick. He comes to terms with it pretty quickly. So I imagine you writing the film will have had to have gone through pretty much the same kind of process, no? Kind of thinking if you knew when you were going to die, how you would come to terms with that. So that must have been quite cathartic in a way for you, no?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There's a line in the film that Mort says when he's being interviewed by the Kate character, Lucy Hale, where he says, "I don't know why people are so afraid of death, because before you were born, you weren't alive. And then after you die, you just kind of go back to not being alive."
Yeah. No.
And, that was just something I came up with at some point in my head, like years before I'd ever wrote this, just a way to kind of help me deal with the idea of death. And it's funny, I guess, through writing it and then through making it, and now that we're kind of further down the road and it's a little bit in my rearview mirror, I've actually reflected and I have a deeper understanding, I think, of that same line that I kind of came up with years ago, that we really just go back to a state that we were before. And then also, I think in my personal life, I've just, done a lot of kind of growth in the last 10 years, I think, especially since I've been back in LA since 2012. So yeah, it was much more of a cathartic experience than I actually thought it would be. And I didn't find that out until like way later after we shot the movie. Like this past year really is kind of when I sort of realized these sort of changes within myself.
I mean, talking about, you said that there was a friend who kind of worked with dead people or worked around death, and that kind of the film sort of deals with that because of Mort's job, no, the family business. Please, I don't know. I didn't even Google this because I just wanted to find out myself. Asking you, is there such a thing as what was it called now? A post-mortem artist? Is that actually a thing?
So yeah, it's actually I think this is sort of where the idea kind of spawned from. I think it was a mixture of the short I did a long time ago, and I came across online. I don't know how I became aware of this, but they have funerals similar to this, where they, if you Google, I think it's called, in the film we call it adventure funerals,
Right.
but I think it's called extreme funerals. So if you Google extreme funerals, there are people, they're sitting in cars or they're at, a table. Um, it's a real thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it reminded me a little bit of kind of like in like 100, 200 years ago, they used to take photographs of
Hmm.
the dead pose. No, it kind of reminded me of that kind of thing. Yeah, but I wasn't sure if it was something that still went on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know about the picture so much, but yeah, the funerals, if you look it up, and I thought that was the other thing I was trying to tackle, I think with myself or maybe with the film, is like you said, how death, and I feel it's a cultural thing really. In our culture, death is very taboo, and it's very hush hush, and it's very behind closed doors, and it's cleaned up very fast, and we don't really experience it. And when you look at other cultures, um and some cultures bring the body home, to
Yeah.
stay in the living room for a week or whatever it is. And it's not, death is viewed very differently than it is in our society. And so I think for me that was like also, an interesting, not just visual, but just an interesting theme to kind of deal with or to think about as a society. Why are we so fearful of something, especially when we, have religion and all of these other beliefs that back up such beautiful beliefs surrounding death? But in our society, we tend to, like hide it from view really. And then when we do deal with it, say at a funeral or at a wake, I've been to very few funerals, and I actually went to my grandfather's funeral when I think I was about 10. And we went to the wake. I went to the wake with my mother, and it was horrifying. I think it was, I mean, it was really petrifying as a child to deal with that. And I think there could have, maybe there's a better way. I mean, maybe if he was doing something he loved when we went to the wake, maybe that wouldn't have been as traumatic as a
Mm.
10-year-old child.
Yeah. And then going off a slightly attack, I want to talk a little bit about. I mean, the film focuses mainly on kind of death and coming to grips with it almost, but at the same time, there's it's infused with a lot of kind of sexuality, especially with kind of Mort's he's trying to find love before he leaves us, no, and then obviously his uncle is very sexual, and that why
Mhm.
did you decide to kind of merge those two things together so much, kind of reaching death and then how important sexuality might actually be?
Sure. I think that to me, that was sort of a throwback for me to, kind of like 80s dark comedies, that tend to have a lot of, it's more for fun. And I think it's also to juxtapose. I mean, if you think about sexuality versus death, I mean, life comes from sex. And
Sure.
so it's kind of the opposite. And I don't think a lot of people will make that connection. Um, I think also a lot of the especially with Jim's character, um, a lot of that is Jim brought so much to the
Okay.
role himself, to where he was essentially, Barry was supposed to kind of be the pervy uncle, the kind of weird, uncle at dinner, and oh, Uncle Barry's coming over. Oh God,
Yeah.
okay. And he did a great job, and I think also with the edit and stuff like that, it just kind of went into that kind of thing. And again, it's sort of like Night Shift. I don't know if you remember Night Shift from the
Yeah,
80s.
yeah,
All of
no. Oh, way back. Yeah, yeah.
these comedies, they had a little bit of just fun raunchiness, I guess you might want to, you could say. And then again, juxtaposed with death. I think it was just a really interesting place to kind of go against the whole death theme.
Uh-huh. And then just to finish off, I was quite curious. I mean, obviously, when you were thinking about the whole narrative here and thinking about this life day count, that you must have kind of brainstormed with yourself so much to kind of think about the negatives and the positives and kind of how this would benefit people and society and big companies and things like that. Obviously, like insurance companies, certain hypochondriacs, those kind of things. That'd be perfect now. But what kind of ideas
Sure.
did you kind of come up that you wanted to implement that maybe you thought were a bit too on the nose or a bit too far to go, maybe?
A bit, what was the last part?
Sorry, maybe a bit too on the nose or a bit too maybe hard or not as comic or you
Yeah.
couldn't kind of make comedy out of it, for example, that surprised you when you were kind of researching this kind of
Yeah. It was weird. So there were actually a lot more rules. The doctor scene was a lot longer, and just for time and pacing, we cut it down. And that kind of laid out even more kind of rules to the situation. And one of the benefits in the script was that you would get all these perks. And the main reason, and it is in the movie, when the whole reason they go is to qualify for a better rate on their mortgage. And so the whole sort of setup for that and why people would do this is they would get, there's tax incentives. Like if our government could figure out a way, or if someone could figure out a way to find out people's death date, everybody else would go on top of that and try and monetize it, or figure out like how would, oh, okay, well, this person is going to live to be 90. So we'll give them a better rate on a mortgage for whatever, because we know they're good for it. They're not going to have a heart attack when they're 45 or whatever. And then there were a lot more.
Something that happens today. Yeah. I mean, that's something that happens right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, sort of kind of bridging like to reality, but also for the thing to where Mort, as far as he, kind of takes it better than average. One, he takes it better because that's his job and he's kind of like, he's around death. But also it was sort of a thing to where in the society, it was people are aware you can do this. And so it was kind of a less of a taboo in a sense, or it was a less of a shock. Because if we lived in a world, maybe when we knew people were going to die, it would make it less taboo. Because it would be a conversation we'd have. If you have your death date, this is something you have to plan for, and you'd have to talk to your family for, and people would be prepared for.
Grieve beforehand,
yeah.
Well, listen, unfortunately, I've got to cut you loose, but it's been
okay.
Real pleasure to meet you, Danny. I wish you the best of success with the film. I'm sure it's going to go down really well. I loved it. So I hope to speak to you again sometime soon, sir. Have a great day.
All right. Great. Thank you.
All the very best.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
Just wish I met you sooner.
Better late than never.
I've just been so angry, afraid, happy, all at the same time.
Have a seat, Mortimer.
Relax. When you and Nicole were dating, did you guys ever try pegging?
Pegging? What is that?
Pegging's when a girl puts on a dildo and bangs